By the way, if you're joining us for the first time, we're on our last session going over the Ninja Selling Book by Larry Kendall. This is week 10, and we're covering pages 200 through 224 this week. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And we're going to start out with some gratitudes this morning. So who wants to share some gratitudes with us?
I had a closing this morning that should have closed on Friday, but happened today.
Well,
so I'm grateful that it happened this morning.
Nice. Who else has got some gratitudes? Could be real estate related or not.
I've got several. One is that I had a contract fall through a week ago Friday, and it was devastating because the seller stuff was all on a truck heading to Florida. Put it back on the market, and within 2 days I had a way above full price cash offer that I sold myself.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
And that was last
amazing.
Tuesday or Wednesday, and we're closing on it tomorrow.
Wow.
Wait, you're
Where
closing on it
was
tomorrow,
this
and this
at?
just happened last week?
Cash.
Cash.
The title
Cash
work
is
was
king,
already
baby.
title work was already done because we had another contract. So all they had to do is wire funds.
Some things work out for the better, right, Pat?
Well, the seller's thrilled, even though she was devastated originally.
Yeah.
She's gonna have 16,000 more than she had on the first one.
Wow. The magic wand has to do with putting people in that pretend state so they're more open to telling you what is very important for them, or maybe the most important thing for them. And it tends to drop their guard a little bit on while they're talking to you and help gain clarity. But that 85% perfect house story is a good one to remember also. Also, I want you to keep this in mind. Use this with somebody in your office that might be having a rough day like Pat had last week, that you help control the process and your customer controls the decision, or shortened, you control the process, they control the decisions. So keep that in mind. And then let's hear from somebody else. What was your key takeaway from the 4 personality profiles from last week? Let's see. Who looks like they're ready to answer this morning? Come on, Gabriella. Tell us what you took away from that last week. Were you with us? I think you were. Oh, sorry, you're muted. There you go.
I mean, well, I just met a new customer, like a buyer, and I was trying to apply, what kind of personality she was. She was very outgoing, so I had to back up a little bit. So, she was just talking and talking and talking. I have to be more like listening. So I don't know if that's what you're talking about.
Well, did you figure out what she was?
Yeah, she was very outgoing.
Okay, so she was party or power?
I would say party.
Okay, so what would be some of your suggestions? Either you or anybody else, feel free to chime in.
Well,
Probably want to make it fun, right?
No,
Yeah, and
Go
he
for
wanted fun.
Fun. That's what we want to find fun for those party people. Talk about how, maybe close to social things if you're talking about from a buyer perspective, things like that. So.
and I think you have to pick up
Yeah.
the pace too with somebody like that and try to have fun with them and try to share in their excitement.
Yes. If you're a more calm, peaceful person, you might have to amp up your personality just a little bit while you're dealing with them.
Okay,
Good points.
thank you.
And then we also, the process here of the consultation, the connection, information, solution, and proposal. We started that last week, and that's where we're going to pick up this morning, talking about information and the 3 C's. And those are clarity, confidence, and making them comfortable in making a decision. So those are the 3 things that you're going to shoot for. 3 C's: clarity, confidence, comfortable. One of the ways that you're going to do that is through asking questions. And those questions should be in this sequence. So somebody walk me through what would be some examples of number 2 there. I think we're all down on number 1. We probably want to remember what on number 1. It's a 4-letter acronym. Sounds like a car.
Ford.
Ford, thank you. What does that stand for? Rick Berry, how about it? What's it stand for? Ford. I know you got it. That's an awesome background, by the way. I don't know if that's a painting that you did or it's a virtual background, but it's pretty cool. Just press the space bar if you want to talk there. He's still muted.
Can you hear me now? There we go. That's a tapestry my wife and daughter bought. Ford, family, occupation, recreation, and decision.
Dreams.
Not decision. Dreams, yes.
Yep.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. So those are the way you're going to build rapport. And then what about foundational questions? So that prior learning, what would be key maybe to bring in here? Let's just pretend like you're talking with a buyer or seller. What would be some things here that you might want to bring up? Anybody? In a quiet crowd
What's
this
made
morning.
them think about wanting to sell their beautiful home?
Right. So if let's just say that you had somebody, let's say we're dealing with a seller and you've already talked with them some about selling their home, you might want to go into asking them questions just to go over what you have learned previously. So if it's, why they're moving, if it's what they love about their house, if it's things that they've done to it, those are things that you're going to cover with prior learning. And then diagnostic, you're just trying to gain clarity over it is either how they want the process to go, or maybe from a buyer perspective, what it is exactly that they're looking for. And then you can work in towards that solution or soft closing question. If you haven't read chapter 40, I am going to encourage you to go back and read this, because this is a great example that Larry goes through over, in this case, a missed opportunity for this Marriott timeshare salesperson. But he basically does a rehash with his wife after this and walks her through how he would have done it if he were the salesperson. And it's a really interesting dialogue that they go through on how he asked questions, the type of questions that he asked, and leading the customer to make their own decisions. And he's basically trying to get them to answer these questions: the who, what, where, why, and how. Well, those are hard to read off this early in the morning. But who has some input after maybe reading this chapter that they might want to share with the group?
Okay, so I do. So my husband, he does this to me and I didn't even know it. So when he wants something, he totally takes me through this whole process. Like, he's really bidding for a new car and he had me all sold on the car. And as I read this story, I was like, oh, he just worked me over in the whole process.
So it could have to do with real estate, or it could have to do with
Yeah.
marriage or whatever here.
Or a new car.
But it's interesting in this, I thought it was interesting in this story where in timeshare, which I can imagine that would be most of us probably think of that as a very hard sell, maybe a high pressure sale, that here he had this salesperson had a couple who actually owns a Marriott timeshare, and basically kind of let that slide through their fingers, I guess, if you will. Anybody have a scenario with a current customer or client that they've used something similar to this story, or just to try to gain clarification or present a solution? All right. Well, I would encourage you, go back and reread that chapter again, because it's a great example of how you can ask the right questions at the right time to help your customers and clients gain clarity. Okay, as we work our way towards the proposal or solution point, there was 6 points that he brings up. And the first one is get face-to-face when the game is on the line. And face-to-face may look a little bit different these days, but hopefully all of you have become skilled in how to do a Zoom meeting with your clients. So if you can't actually get face-to-face with them, you could at least get face-to-face over your computer, or you could send them information and then talk to them. But face-to-face is going to be best, because you'll be able to pick up on things that you won't be able to pick up on if you're simply emailing or texting them. So face-to-face when the game is on the line. Whoop. Also, I wanted to bring in this. This was the importance of the words that you choose. So previous person I worked with brought this up to me, and he would go over this continually. But first was that words matter, and the choice of words matters more. And last, it's the passion that's important in how you use those words. So think about that when you're talking with your customers, when you're having those consultation, that words do matter. All right, then he's going into figuring out which of the learning styles your customer or client is. So most people tend to be visual learners. What would be some key clues that you're dealing with a visual learning style person? Key clues. Mary Grotsky, how about it? Visual learners.
Visual learners. Why do you have to pick on me, Neil? Let's see. You mean in terms of of clients, visual learners?
Yes, absolutely.
They're looking around, they're noticing everything within detail, visual learners.
All right.
They also use words like, I don't see that, or I see that, or I'd like to look at that. They use words that actually tell you they're a visual. Instead of I think or I feel, they're saying, let's see that. Let's look at that.
Right. I see
Okay,
what you mean. I need to
Yes.
take a look at that. So there's a lot of those different clues there that they might say that you could pick up on that they're a visual learner. And then what would be some key things that you might want to, as you try to help them gain clarity, how would you work on presenting them that information?
Neil, this is Marjorie. I would make sure that they had documentation there to pertain to what we're going over, so they could look and compare and actually get a clear understanding of what's been offered.
Great. So, one key thing here, if you've got somebody that's like this, you may want to, I think you'd want to do this with almost every learning style, but, making sure they have a printed copy of a purchase and sale, a draft purchase and sale agreement. Or in the case of, say you're working with a buyer, make sure you show them or email them so they can look at it, a printed CMA of that specific neighborhood showing values. Those type of things. Those are what you want to work on with those visual learners. All right, what about the next 30%? That would be the auditory what would be some things that you might hear them say?
I hear you.
I hear you. It sounds good to me. What else?
I would like to hear more.
Great. I would like to hear more. So you just keep in mind this is going to be a smaller group, but you need to just listen for that subtle and hidden. And if they're saying that, you probably need to engage more in a conversation, maybe than a presentation or showing them things. So you might have to talk through it. Any other key takeaways with somebody? Anybody working with one of these folks right now that you've maybe tried to tweak or differ how you're presenting information?
Neil, I try to think outside the box from just years of being in a sales career. So if somebody likes to communicate through hearing, the doorbell is huge. It's good to ring the doorbell if that works. They like to hear that. If somebody is seeing, like you want to turn on the fireplace, gas light, you want them to see things. If there's a fountain, you want them to hear the fountain, or you want somebody to see the fountain. So you try to think of things like that.
You might also
when showing like a house.
Yep. I think when showing a house, if you could always have some relatively calming music playing, I think it sets a different tone when you go into a house and there's some soft music playing versus going in just an empty house, or a house maybe that has maybe there's some neighborhood noise that you don't want to highlight as much, or like C. Lauren said, maybe there's a nice fountain out there that you do want to hear.
Neil, it's also important if you're on a busy street or near a busy street to, go in and close the doors and let them see how quiet it is. The lack of sound can be important as well.
Good point. Or if there's let's say there's some trains reasonably close by, you might want to try to make sure that this is harder, but sometimes it's helpful if you have a buyer that's looking at one of those houses and you're really close to a train track, that you want to be there while a train comes through. So, that's always, if I've had people that wanted to purchase a house near a train track, I think that's important that they know what they're getting into before they close on it, if at all possible.
Along with how quiet things are, a lot of people forget to brag and show off their soft closing of the drawers and the cabinets. And some people just don't realize the house has that. So to bring up anything you can think of around the home for sound or to look at, soft close is a good one. It's kind of nice to have that upgrade.
Quiet
you might
dishwasher
even
too.
Dishwasher's good. That's where one of those things for the visual people, and I don't see this much in houses recently, but I know sometime back you'd see a decent amount of maybe some small note cards around the house pointing out key features of things that you might not realize. So things like that C. Lauren mentioned, the soft close cabinets or drawers, those would be something that they won't know that unless they open them or you have it mentioned somewhere. And then, you might want to think about highlighting those key features by just putting some little tint cards in key places throughout the house, especially if they've got a nice quiet dishwasher that's especially in some of these more modern, very open plans. Those are important.
I used to do the note cards, and years ago, at the beginning of my career, Steve Brown came through a walkthrough of an open house, and he said, house was great, but too many note cards. It was distracting him. So I don't know if I did. So I got scared and stopped my note cards.
Well, that was the house that you had the 65 note cards on. I remember that one. Just kidding.
Yeah.
So, all right, and kinesthetic is the last. So these people want to touch and feel something. So if you've got, you may want to go through the house and do some of those things that C. Lauren mentioned. Maybe they've got the upgraded cabinets or a specific type of granite or various other things that they might just need to touch and feel. So keep in mind there is that group of people, but that's your smallest group of people.
Hey, Neil, even though it's the smallest percentage, everybody has a little bit of the kinesthetic in them, even though some people have maybe like 0.5%. And sometimes if you can stop them and they're looking while, listening, seeing, and calculating, and just ask them how the house makes them feel, it'll flip them over into that kinesthetic side, and sometimes will help them make a decision.
Interesting point. Or let's say if the house has a really nice backyard, you might want to pause for a minute and sit down in some of the furniture out there. And if you happen to know what style they are, you might say things like, wow, look at the view back here. It's awesome. Or the flowers are nice. I could see you sitting here looking at the yard, or I could see you, back here listening to the fountain or the birds or whatever it might be. So great points, Pat. Thank you. All right. Next item he talks about is matching and mirroring your customer or client. This was an interesting little photo I came across, probably one of the most photographed couples around these days. But isn't it interesting how they are exactly matched in their body position, gestures, and everything in this photo. So I think you can do this in a way that hopefully won't be creepy to your client, but you can do small things like if you are one of those people who talks with your hands and you're dealing with somebody who doesn't, you might want to calm those hands down and not do that as much. Or you might want to sit in a similar position, but just try not to do every little thing so that it's very noticeable to your customers. But you will tend to put people at ease if you're doing something similar to what they are. Has this been particularly effective for anybody, or does anybody consciously look at how their body position or gestures are when they're around a client?
Absolutely. I think that is a key element in any, especially in closing with clients. Is if you have an owl, or what is your introverts that are not, and you've got a party salesperson, which majority of real estate agents, I'd say, are in that party bull or party power positions, personalities. I literally sometimes sit on my hands so that I can talk to the engineer, just because, you have to match them a little bit or they won't feel comfortable. And that is one of our 3 C's. And so, if they're sitting back in their chair, then you need to sit back in your chair. If they're sitting, sorry, I call. Are y'all still there? A call is coming through. But as a party person, if a sales agent for me is sitting back in the chair and I'm leaning forward, engaged, and they're just laying back, to me, it comes across disinterested. Like they're not, they're not matching my energy, that they're not as enthusiastic as I am. And that's a turn off for me. But so I think that is absolutely key for us in our connection, to not only connect with our clients, but also to make them feel comfortable.
All right, thank you. All right, next you're going to look from big picture to small picture. So you're going to think about things that are, let's say, maybe in your market or region. How are things doing before you drill down into their specific neighborhood? So those are some key things there you might want to look at. So big picture to small picture. And I think most of our areas now, it's pretty similar inventory wise across most of our markets. You may have something specific in your market where the inventory is vastly different, but most of them at least are fairly similar these days. Next is maintaining the non-anxious presence. Now, I couldn't find some perfect photos for this, but I thought these two were interesting. So when you talk about the power need dynamic, what do you think about when you think about these two kid photos here? What do you think? Between the
One wants their way and the other is pouty and needy.
right. So this was kind of as close as I could get with some kids' photos on the power need dynamic. But I think this is an interesting concept because the higher your power, the lower your need is. So let's think about. I think I shared with you a little bit last week that we were out shopping for a new mattress and had an interesting encounter with a salesperson. But if I was really high need, like I need a new mattress tomorrow, then my power is low. But if I was, I had the low need, I've got higher power. So anybody have anything specific that you might be dealing with somebody right now on this concept, or something that you can recall back from one of your clients that you've dealt with over the power need dynamic that might resonate with anybody? Well, just keep in mind there that you want to just be relatively calm, and you don't want to be necessarily high in either of these categories, but you just need to know that if, sometimes we have people, specifically might have some buyers in this market that have really high need because they've been unable to get a house, for example. They're getting beat out. So you may want to look at some options that they could explore, like that risk tolerance chart we shared a few weeks ago. Okay, next we're going to talk about the 3 rules of communication. And we're going to start with showing is better than telling. Yeah. What would be more important? Telling you about the wildfires in California, or actually showing you a photo of the wildfires in California? And then asking is better than telling. And lastly, it matters who says it. So one of the things I think about when it matters who says it is on the selling side of the equation, when you are asking sellers about, if you're using the pre-listing interview questions and they say things, and there's things on there that you could easily look up in your MLS or your county records, but it's going to matter who says it because you want them saying it. So for example, if you have the customer telling you what list price that they should list at, and it's something that it's in the range, it matters that they're saying it versus you telling them what they should list it at. Okay, so showing's better than telling, asking is better than telling, and who says it. All right, last here is helping customers make good decisions. So are you focused on both the analytical and the emotional side of the equation? So what happens with people when they make emotional decisions? What's happened to some of your folks recently if they were purely on the emotional side of the equation?
I haven't had that experience per se, but I do know it's a bad thing to make decisions, in certain situations where you are emotional because you're not thinking rationally.
Okay. Who else?
They also tend to regret it later. And they
Right.
will
So that
more than
may tend
likely,
to
yeah,
lead to a case
You
of
get
buyer's
buyer's
remorse
remorse.
as an example.
yes. And they will blame you.
Yeah. So I see some comments in the chat that rushed decisions equals regret later. So that does tend to be the case. And I think you may have some people, especially in these low inventory markets, of people that rush to a decision because they have that fear of being able to, they fear that they might miss out on the property. And they rush to go ahead and make a decision, and then only to see them later back out during the inspection or for some other reason. And I think also if you have people that get too analytical, they can tend to delay that decision-making process, which in many of our markets may equate to not getting the property that they want. Who else has got some advice or discussion for us on the analytical and emotional decision process?
Yeah, I had a client recently, showed him a lot of houses, a buyer client, and it seemed like he had the paralysis of analysis kind of thing going on, but the price range he was trying to shop in was keeping him at, in an area that they weren't necessarily the most favorable properties to even look at to begin with. But he eventually found a house and made the decision, and it's no backing out now. He's very, very happy. So I think the emotional part plays a big thing. You have to picture yourself analyzing that you're going to be happy in that house long term. You don't want to be like in It's a Wonderful Life and you're going up the staircase and that ball comes off in your hand and you're just frustrated with this house 6 months down the road or a year down the road or whatever, and you have that regret. So emotion does play a big part, but I think it's a combination of both you have to have.
Yeah, good points, Rick. And I think, it may be tougher for specifically on the buyer side of things in our market right now, because if people are purely, really it could be one way or the other. They could be purely analytical and think about just that I'm not getting the choices that I want. And then they may just not buy anything right now. But, you may also have to just, if you have people that are in that discussion, you may also have to talk about things like the power in the incredibly record low interest rates that we have right now. In that, yes, they may not be able to get every single thing that they want in a house for the price they're willing to pay, but they are taking advantage of the lowest interest rates that many of us will see in our lifetime. So that's another key thing that they need to take into account there. On the emotional side of things, you might just have to have more of a conversation about that. What we were talking about earlier, that 85% perfect house story, because, giving them permission to go ahead and make a decision when they're not getting 100% of exactly everything that they were looking for on their list. All right. Well, for our breakout group today, because we're almost at the end of our book here, I would like to discuss what is the most important impactful insight that you have discovered out of the Ninja Selling book.
Well, I shared with everybody that I have tried to start getting back on the Ninja 9 and doing that. And I was making my customer service calls recently and ended up listing a property for someone that I hadn't talked to in a couple of years, and found out that that person was going through a very rough time and may have even ended up losing the home if we didn't step in there, and kind of had the discussion like, hey, the market's very good right now. you'll actually make quite a bit of money in selling and sort of be able to reset. So anyway, it's already kind of helped me, but yeah, for me, as far as the most impactful thing, I do want to begin doing the reviews with past customers and meeting with them, maybe 2 of them each week, and implement that in my business, because I haven't been doing that. And there's certainly a lot of good reasons to call right now, even if they just end up deciding maybe to refinance the house they're in or something like that. I could see where you'd get referrals just from being the source of information and being in front of them, you know.
You bring up some great points. And one of the things that I've been talking with some of our mortgage partners about is that, as you know, many of you know that the CARES Act that was passed back in March allowed for forbearance of people's mortgages for up to 12 months. So that is not too far down the road for some of these people if they got on that forbearance train early. But some key points here to remember are, one, they most likely will not be able to refinance because many mortgage companies, I think all the mortgage companies pretty much, are not going to let those people refinance until they're totally clear of forbearance. They've paid back all that money and they've either gone 60 or 90 days. So we will have, you know, and nationwide, the numbers I've heard are somewhere between 3.5 and 4 million households are in forbearance. Okay, so that's a fairly big number, but I don't think it's really, from the different people I've heard, I don't think it's going to be that big of an issue as far as the overall housing market, because there is such high demand right now and low inventory. The other key point is just what Doug mentioned, that many of these people, even though, and I'm not saying that your person was or wasn't in this category, I don't know, but if people have lost their job and they need to sell their house, there really couldn't be a better time for them to do it than right now. And if they're in that situation, they may want to do it sooner versus later. Who knows what the inventory situation is going to look like next spring? I don't know. But right now it's very strong. So if you have people in your sphere that, you know, got laid off or have lost their job and they own a house, you may want to do just what Doug said, and you may want to specifically target them on doing a real estate review and just asking them how things are going, because that may be, you know, it may be an opportunity for them, and certainly they need to consider they may have equity in the house that they didn't realize. So I don't know, have any of you dealt with a situation of somebody that's in forbearance yet? No? Well, think about it. It may be something that's going to be important. How about 1 or 2 more people sharing with us on key things that they picked up from their breakout group?
So we were just kind of talking about truly trusting the process and actually letting the flow happen, and then the end is a natural result. So I didn't say earlier, but every week I've implemented at least one thing that has come out of the week's work. So not last week, but the week before, I had 3 closings. And this week, I also have 3 closings. And so it's been pretty immediate to me, and very affirming. So thank you.
Nice. Glad to hear it,
Yeah.
Jody, sorry. All right. Anybody else? Let's go back and I've just got one more slide, I think, to finish it up. And interestingly enough, several of the things that are on my slide here are things that y'all talked about it. So, you know, think about just being out there helping people will put you in a good place. And those Ninja 9, as Doug talked about, you know, they're easy to do, but they're also easy not to do. And if, you know, you're not, more than likely, unless you're like Jody, you're not going to do all of these things every single week, right? But just don't be afraid to get back up on that proverbial horse and start over. Today's Monday. It's a new week. just get back in there, focus on doing the things that will be part of that process and help you be successful. So we have worked our way through the end of the book, with the exception of the indices. There are two factors that two other things that I could cover. I was planning on doing this for just the 10 weeks. There are two things in there as far as the buyer process and the seller process, and that if enough of you are interested, I'm happy to do a couple of more weeks, and we'll go over the buyer process one week and the seller process the next, if there is enough interest in that. So I don't know. You could raise your hand. You can email me if that's something that you're interested in, and we have enough participation. I'm happy to do a couple more weeks. Like I said, we'll do one on the buyer process and one on the seller process. If see, Marjorie's got her hand up. So